threatening humanity. It's happening right here, in our very homes, and corrupting the lives of our loved ones. Yes, friends, I'm talking about this. It may look like a harmless bagel toaster, but inside is a deadly donut.
Gamers, imagine a world where the PlayStation never existed. Hard to believe, right? But what if this iconic console was actually born from a shocking betrayal? Today's story dives into how Nintendo's backstabbing decision led to the creation of the legendary PlayStation, forever altering the gaming landscape. So where did it all start? To set the stage, we have to go back to the late 1980s. Nintendo was the undisputed king of video games. They ruled the market with the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, and were enjoying massive success with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES. That means everyone was playing Nintendo back then, from Mario to Zelda Classic, right? But as technology was advancing, there was a new player in town: CD-ROMs. Unlike cartridges, CDs could store way more data, which meant bigger, more detailed games and even full-motion videos. Sounds cool, right? Well, Nintendo thought so too. And guess who they teamed up with to make that CD technology a reality? Sony. At that time, the gaming industry was at a turning point. The 1980s had been dominated by Nintendo and their successful consoles, but competitors were looming. Sega had already made waves with its Genesis console, offering faster processing power and more mature games which appealed to an older audience. Even though Nintendo was still the king, they knew that they couldn't rest on their laurels. The rise of new technologies like CD-ROMs wasn't just a novelty, it was the future. This new format could completely change how games were made and experienced. CDs allowed for larger and more detailed environments, better music quality, and even full-motion video, something cartridges simply couldn't handle. Yup, you heard that right. Sony, the electronics giant, and Nintendo are a match made in heaven, right? Not exactly. Sony, on the other hand, had its own reasons for wanting to get into the gaming industry. Sure, they were already a tech giant known for their high-quality TVs, audio equipment, and the revolutionary Walkman, but they saw a massive opportunity in the gaming market. Ken Kutaragi, the man who would go on to become the father of the PlayStation, had already proven Sony's chops in gaming by helping develop the SPC 700 sound chip for the Super Nintendo. This chip gave the SNES its rich sound quality, an often overlooked element in the success of Nintendo's games. With this knowledge, Sony was well positioned to bring a new wave of gaming to life. For them, the collaboration with Nintendo was about more than just selling hardware. It was a chance to shape the future of entertainment. It was 1988. And Sony and Nintendo decided to work together on a CD-ROM add-on for the SNES called the PlayStation. Yes, you heard me. The original PlayStation started as a Nintendo project. Sony would handle the CD technology while Nintendo would focus on games. Pretty sweet deal, huh? The idea was simple. Take the power of CDs and combine it with Nintendo's legendary games. The PlayStation was going to blow minds. Or at least that was the plan, until it all went south. In 1991 at the CES, Sony was all set to announce their big partnership with Nintendo. Picture this, Sony on stage showing off the prototype of the groundbreaking console, the PlayStation. People were hyped, but here's where the story takes a wild turn. The very next day, Nintendo dropped a bombshell. They announced a new partnership not with Sony, but with Sony's rival, Philips. Can you imagine the shock on Sony's faces? Right in the middle of CES, Nintendo pulls this stunt. That's some cold-blooded betrayal. For Sony, it wasn't just a business deal gone bad, it was a very public humiliation. They had invested time, money, and reputation into this project. Engineers who had worked tirelessly to perfect the PlayStation prototype were blindsided. The press was already abuzz with the promise of the Sony-Nintendo partnership, and then suddenly, it all fell apart. Behind closed doors, Sony executives were furious. The betrayal could have easily driven them away from the gaming industry altogether. After all, this wasn't their primary market. Why should they fight a losing battle? But Kutaragi, driven by his vision and determination, wouldn't let Sony walk away without a fight. So what happened? Why did Nintendo decide to backstab Sony like that? Well, it turns out Nintendo wasn't too happy with the original deal. They felt like they were giving Sony too much control over licensing for CD games, which, you know, is where the real money comes from. So they ditched Sony and jumped ship to Philips. Ouch. And how did that turn out for Nintendo? Spoiler alert, it didn't. Nintendo's partnership with Philips was a total disaster. Ever heard of the Philips CDI? Probably not. And for a good reason. The games made for it were terrible. Like, legendarily bad. Remember those weird, cringy Zelda games? Yeah, that was Philips' masterpiece. So, Nintendo didn't exactly win with that decision. But what about Sony? Did they just walk away after getting stabbed in the back? No way. This is where the real story begins. Enter Ken Kutaragi, the genius behind the PlayStation. He was an engineer at Sony who had a vision. After Nintendo's betrayal, he didn't throw in the towel. Oh no, he convinced Sony to turn their failed collaboration into their own standalone console. And thus, the PlayStation we know and love today was born. At first, not everyone at Sony was on board with Kutaragi's idea. The company had little experience in developing games or marketing a gaming console. They were used to producing hardware for TVs and music players, not video games. But Kutaragi was relentless. He knew that the PlayStation had the potential to be something more, something that could disrupt the entire gaming industry. He personally lobbied Sony's higher-ups, arguing that they were sitting on a goldmine of untapped potential. In the end, his passion won out, and Sony doubled down on the project, investing heavily in the development of a brand new console from scratch. Now let's talk about the first PlayStation. Released in 1994 in Japan and 1995 worldwide, this was Sony's big moment. They weren't just entering the gaming market, they were about to revolutionize it. The PlayStation was sleek, powerful, and it used CDs, which meant more storage, better graphics, and those cutscenes that blew everyone's mind. If you grew up playing Final Fantasy VII or Metal Gear Solid, you know what I'm talking about. One of the smartest moves Sony made was focusing on third-party developers. They knew that in order to compete with Sega and Nintendo, they needed games, and lots of them. And not just any games, but the kind that could push the PlayStation CD technology to its limits. Early titles like Ridge Racer and Tekken showed off the PlayStation's graphical capabilities, but it was RPGs like Final Fantasy VII that really captured the imagination of gamers around the world. The cinematic cutscenes, the sprawling storylines, and the deep immersive gameplay were unlike anything players had seen before. Suddenly, gaming wasn't just about quick reflexes and high scores, it was about storytelling, emotion, and epic adventures. The PlayStation was at the center of this shift. And let's not forget the price. Sony dropped the PlayStation at $299, $100 less than Sega's Saturn. That move? Genius. It totally blindsided the competition. But wait, it gets better. Sony knew they had something special, and they played their cards right. They made it super easy for third-party developers to create games for the PlayStation, something Nintendo was kinda bad at. Remember how strict Nintendo was with developers back in the NES days? Sony flipped the script. They gave developers freedom, which is why so many iconic games ended up on PlayStation. PlayStation didn't just rely on Nintendo's style of family-friendly games, they appealed to an older audience too. PlayStation became the console that made gaming cool for teens and adults. That means everyone wanted a PlayStation. Beyond its technical achievements and commercial success, the PlayStation had a profound impact on the cultural landscape of the 1990s and beyond. It wasn't just about the games, it was about the lifestyle that came with owning a PlayStation. Sony's marketing campaigns targeted an older demographic, positioning gaming as a mature, sophisticated form of entertainment. The iconic gray console became a centerpiece in living rooms across the globe, and its influence extended into music, fashion, and even film. Gaming was no longer just a hobby for kids. It was a legitimate form of entertainment for teens and adults alike. The PlayStation brand quickly became synonymous with cutting-edge technology and cool, solidifying its place as more than just a console. It was a cultural phenomenon. And think about it, none of this would have happened if Nintendo hadn't betrayed Sony. If they had stuck with the original PlayStation project, who knows what gaming might look like today. But that backstab lit a fire under Sony, and the rest is history. By the end of the 90s, the PlayStation had sold millions of units worldwide, and Nintendo, well, they were playing catch-up with the N64. Sony's revenge was sweet. They took over the gaming world. So there you have it, folks. The story of how a corporate betrayal changed the course of gaming history forever. The PlayStation wasn't just a console, it was a statement. Sony went from being the underdog to becoming a dominant force in gaming, all because Nintendo made a decision they probably regret to this day. And now, as Sony continues to lead the industry with the PS5, we can't help but wonder, what if Nintendo had never made that fateful decision? Would Sony have ever become the first gaming giant they are today? Guess we'll never know. But one thing's for sure, the PlayStation legacy is here to stay. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this wild trip down gaming history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more awesome content. Until next time, keep playing, and remember, never backstab your friends, especially in business.